ask or chip in anything you want along the way. And also, please feel free to say something at the end before we go round to the churchyard. Okay, thank you. So, I was going to say, welcome to any parishioners. I don't think, are either of you parishioners of All Saints Church? I have apologies from Julie Ball of the Naseby Battlefield Project, who is on her way back from Yorkshire today. She was visiting the grave of Thomas Fairfax, who was one of the great general of the Parliamentarian Army. I went to school in Otley, West Yorkshire. The Fairfax family were benefactors of my school, and I was in Fairfax House, so that's a nice coincidence. This has been organised by the Northamptonshire Radical History Group. Sue from the group here, and John Buckle and Russ. We organise like historical walking tours and do talks about local history. John most recently talked about Northampton and the general strike, because it was the 100th anniversary last week, or very recently, of the general strike. So, the Leveller movement of the Civil War period of the mid-1640s are remembered. The Levellers are remembered as a grassroots movement advocating popular sovereignty, the extension of the right to vote, religious tolerance, and equality before the law. However, the term Leveller was first applied some 40 years earlier. In April of 1607, the vicar of All Saints Church here alerted the congregation to what he described as ungodly activities occurring in the county. He was referring to the Midlands Revolt, that ordinary people who used the common land were protesting against the enclosure of the land by the big landowners. They were protesting non-violently. There were people from all over the southern Midlands, but the Northamptonshire was a focus of it. Charles II, who is just above us here, his grandfather, James I, ordered the authorities to take decisive action. So on the 2nd of June, 1,000 protesters at Newton near Kettering were attacked by the authorities. Between 40 and 50 people were died. The ringleaders were hung, drawn and quartered, and that included John Reynolds, who was considered like the leader of the Levellers, the diggers who were occupying the lands there, pulling down the fences. He was a tinker from Desborough. His head ended up on the gate, North Gate, Northampton, up at Campbell Square. So we hear of the Levellers again in the 1640s, during the devastating struggle of the Civil War between the King and Parliament. Northampton gave solid support to the Parliament, resisted several attempts by the Royalists to occupy the town. Strategically, Northampton was an important town for the parliamentarians. The town supported boots for the army, and the decisive battle of the Civil War, the Battle of Naseby of 1645, not far from here. It is said that Oliver Cromwell stayed in Castlereagh House, just down here on Mayfair, the night before the battle. Very little is known of William Thompson's life before and during the Civil War, but he was a horseman in the New Model Army, and he's believed to have fought in many of the major battles of the war. After the defeat of the king in 1647, he was court-martialed and dismissed from the army on trumped-up charges after a tavern brawl. Many of his colleagues, believed it was because of his agitation. However, he continued to agitate amongst his former comrades, and he was arrested and imprisoned in Windsor Castle alongside John Milburn. John Milburn was another former soldier who'd fallen foul of the new military and parliamentary regime. John Milburn, known as Freeborn John, the leading figure of the Leveller movement. Thompson and Milburn worked closely together while they were imprisoned, and they came to an understanding that they saw that they fought the misrule and injustice during the war. It was being replaced by a greater tyranny. The authorities wanted to execute Thompson, but because he'd been discharged from the army, they couldn't apply military law to him, so he escaped execution on that occasion. Eventually he was released and resumed his former agitation with soldiers, in close contact with Milburn's fellow Levellers. Milburn stayed in prison most of the time. In February of 1648, a second civil war broke out, and many former soldiers, like Thompson, formed irregular units to join the fight. They, along Leveller principles, they elected their own officers, and it's understood that this is maybe why Thompson is known as Captain William Thompson. He was elected captain by his own sort of irregular units. So this is in 1648. This second civil war was over quite quickly by the end of the summer, by August, but there was kind of significant unrest in the new model army. The troops hadn't been paid. They were not impressed that there'd been more reform, and in mid-April, several regiments were ordered to Ireland to suppress an uprising there. In London, in several places, troops mutinied. The mutinies were quickly suppressed. In early May, Thompson organised a gathering of mutineers at Banbury, and many hundreds of Leveller supporters in the army gathered at Banbury, near Banbury. On the 13th of May, though, their main camp nearby Burford was ambushed by Cromwell's troops, and 300 were taken prisoner. Thompson managed to escape with a sort of large group of horsemen. This is near Banbury. He was not with the group at Burford, and he, several days later, on the 17th of May, he arrived in Northampton. At the same time, over in Burford, the church of Burford, where the 300 Leveller troops were being kept prisoner, 3 of them were executed, and including one, Cornet Thompson, who some accounts say was William Thompson's brother. Thompson probably didn't know of this suppression of the main force at Banbury at this time when he occupied Northampton, when he visited Northampton, but he was probably hoping there was going to be a rallying of the Levellers who'd escaped the ambush of various other Leveller groups that were within this part of the country, and he knew that Northampton was kind of sympathetic. The Reverend Thomas Ball of this very church witnessed the events and recorded the events in Northampton over the next couple of days. Also, there's accounts from Mr. Lees, the town clerk, who I will be sort of quoting. So one of the first things Thompson did was release Leveller prisoners from the prison here, 3 Leveller prisoners, and according to the account by Thomas Ball, he then went to the market cross and read his declaration and made a speech to those that came about him, and he would free them from excise, free quarters, taxes and tithes, and exhorted all men to assist him in so good a work. Aware that Cromwell's troops were probably hard on their heels, and that this great rendezvous gathering of Levellers was not going to happen, Thompson sort of headed off the next day, and they camped overnight near Walgrave. It's thought they might be heading for the safety of Rockingham Forest, where they would be kind of safe cover and sympathy. But their camp the following morning at Walgrave was ambushed again by Major Butler and his troops. Thompson, he said, could have escaped. He had a good horse, but he refused to leave his comrades who were on foot, and he single-handedly counter-attacked the pursuers. He charged several times himself and led them 3 miles, but being shot and bleeding, leapt into a wood, which we know as Sywell Wood, and with his horse, and he routed those that first pursued him on horseback. He attempted to staunch the flow of blood from his wounds with moss, and he was offered to surrender, but he refused. Attempting to resume battle, a hidden trooper armed with a blunderbuss sprung from behind cover and shot him in the back, quote, with a brace of bullets, so that he began to stagger, and the fellow, to make sure, gave him a good blow with the end of his carbine. Thompson's body was brought back to Northampton, paraded around the market square on a market day on the back of a horse, before being laid to rest in the churchyard here of All Saints the following morning. It's said that Mrs. Thompson, his wife, hearing of her husband's death, being great with child and near her time, fell into labour, and both she and her child are dead. So the levellers had been effectively sort of smashed and suppressed, the levellers in the New Model Army. And the historical movement, the leveller movement sort of faded away into like the shadows of history. Around the same time, there's this sort of leveller rebellion. Some landless, poor people started occupying common land in different places. The first being at St George's Hill in Surrey, and they were called true levellers and diggers. Again, their colony was quickly dispersed by the authorities. But in the following spring of 1650, another colony, a digger colony, sprang up at Wellingborough, supported even by local landowners, the local people. They published a declaration, but again, troops were sent from Northampton to disperse them. It's said that the ghost of Thompson haunts the stretch of the Kettering Road near the Walgrave Turnpike. An old legend tells of Thompson the outlaw and friend of the people, a Robin Hood-style rebel, who was killed there and his body displayed on the gibbets. Until recently, Gibbs Wood, where Gibbs Wood once stood alongside the road, it's been gone for about 20 years now, but locals tell of him haunting that stretch of the road. So over more recent centuries, radical Northampton has continued to uphold the principles of justice and democracy championed by Thompson. In 1874, 3,000 Northamptonians rioted on the market square here because their progressive political candidate had been thwarted by vile bigotry. And between 1880 and 1886, they stood by him when he was prevented from taking his seat due to his Republican and theological views. In 1888, our citizens agreed to share the services of their MP with the 200 million unrepresented and oppressed citizens of India. In the 1930s and 40s, local people challenged Oswald Mosley and his black shirts, and in the last few years have continued to challenge divisive racism. So that's my sort of view of William Thompson's legacy. Thank you for listening, and I'd be grateful to know what views you have. Thank you.
That was really good. You didn't mention it was Charles Bradwell.
I thought I think I'm going to be too obvious. Yeah, Charles Bradwell, yes. Yeah, the sort of Northampton.